You have studied Azure for weeks. You open your practice exam. And you fail, not because the material is hard, but because the questions are written in a way that trips up even experienced IT professionals. I have been there. In this video, we are going through 10 realistic AZ-900 practice questions, complete with the correct answers and the explanations behind why each answer is right, and why the other options are wrong. This is part 1 of a 10-part series. By the time we finish all 10 parts, you will have worked through 100 exam-style questions. Stick around until the end, because I saved the trickiest question for last. Let us get into it. Welcome to Skills on Cloud. I am your host, and this channel is all about helping IT professionals like you build real cloud skills and earn certifications that actually matter in the job market. If you are new here, make sure you hit subscribe so you do not miss any of the remaining 9 parts in this series. Quick context before we start. The AZ-900 exam, also called Microsoft Azure Fundamentals, covers 3 main domains: Cloud Concepts, which is about 25 to 30% of the exam; Azure Architecture and Services, which is about 35 to 40%; and Azure Management and Governance, which is about 30 to 35%. The passing score is 700 out of 1,000. In this first part, I have selected 10 questions that span all 3 domains, so you get a balanced warm-up. Each question follows the same format. I read the question, I give you a few seconds to think, then I reveal the answer and explain it in plain language. Question 1. A company wants to migrate its on-premises workloads to the cloud, but needs to maintain full control over the underlying hardware and operating systems. Which cloud deployment model best meets this requirement? Option A, public cloud. Option B, private cloud. Option C, hybrid cloud. Option D, community cloud. Take a few seconds to think. The answer is B, private cloud. Here's why. A private cloud is dedicated infrastructure that is operated solely for one organization, which gives the company full control over the hardware and the operating systems. Public cloud, option A, is shared infrastructure managed by a provider like Microsoft Azure, so you do not have control over the underlying hardware. Hybrid cloud, option C, combines both public and private, but the question asks for full control, which points to private cloud specifically. Community cloud, option D, is shared by organizations with a common concern like compliance, and still does not give a single company full hardware control. Question 2. Which Azure service provides a fully managed relational database with built-in high availability and automatic backups? Option A, Azure Cosmos DB. Option B, Azure SQL Database. Option C, Azure Table Storage. Option D, Azure Data Lake Storage. Think about it for a moment. The answer is B, Azure SQL Database. Azure SQL Database is a platform-as-a-service relational database engine that handles patching, backups, and high availability automatically. Azure Cosmos DB, option A, is a globally distributed NoSQL database, not a relational one. Azure Table Storage, option C, is also NoSQL, designed for key-value pair storage at massive scale. Azure Data Lake Storage, option D, is built for big data analytics workloads, not transactional databases. The 2 key words in this question are relational and fully managed. That combination points directly to Azure SQL Database every time. Question 3. An organization is planning to use Azure and wants to minimize capital expenditure. Which cloud benefit directly supports this goal? Option A, high availability. Option B, elasticity. Option C, consumption-based pricing model. Option D, geo-redundancy. Take a moment. The answer is C, consumption-based pricing model. Capital expenditure, also called CapEx, refers to upfront hardware and infrastructure purchases. The cloud shifts this to operational expenditure, also called OpEx, where you pay only for what you use. That is the consumption-based pricing model. High availability, option A, keeps services running but does not reduce CapEx directly. Elasticity, option B, means you can scale up and down, which saves money long term, but it is not the primary driver of CapEx reduction. Geo-redundancy, option D, is about disaster recovery and uptime, not cost structure. On the real exam, whenever you see CapEx or OpEx, think consumption-based pricing model immediately. Question 4. Which Azure feature allows you to set spending limits and receive alerts when costs approach a defined threshold? Option A, Azure Policy. Option B, Azure Cost Management plus Billing. Option C, Azure Advisor. Option D, Azure Monitor. What do you think? The answer is B, Azure Cost Management plus Billing. This service is specifically designed for tracking, analyzing, and controlling Azure spending. It lets you set budgets, configure cost alerts, and view cost breakdowns by resource. Azure Policy, option A, enforces organizational rules and compliance standards, not cost thresholds. Azure Advisor, option C, gives you recommendations to optimize cost, security, and performance, but it does not let you set budget alerts. Azure Monitor, option D, collects metrics and logs for performance and health monitoring, not for billing alerts. A common distractor on the AZ-900 is confusing Azure Advisor with Cost Management. Remember, Advisor gives recommendations. Cost Management gives controls. Question 5. Which Azure service is used to create a private network that allows Azure resources to securely communicate with each other, with the Internet, and with on-premises networks? Option A, Azure Virtual Network. Option B, Azure VPN Gateway. Option C, Azure ExpressRoute. Option D, Azure Firewall. Think carefully. There is a subtle distinction here. The answer is A, Azure Virtual Network, often shortened to VNet. A VNet is the foundational building block of private networking in Azure. It enables Azure resources like virtual machines to securely communicate with each other, with the public internet, and with on-premises data centers. Azure VPN Gateway, option B, is specifically used to send encrypted traffic between an Azure VNet and an on-premises location over the public internet. It is a component you would deploy inside a VNet, not the network itself. Azure ExpressRoute, option C, also connects on-premises to Azure but uses a dedicated private connection, not the public internet. Azure Firewall, option D, filters and controls traffic. It is a security service, not a networking one. The question describes the broadest definition of private networking, which is VNet. Quick pause here. We are halfway through the 10 questions, and I want to know how you are doing. Drop a comment below right now with the number of questions you have gotten right so far. Type your score out of 5. If you got all 5, type 5 out of 5 with a fire emoji. If you are still warming up, no problem. That is exactly why we are here. Also, if you want me to do a deep dive on any specific Azure topic, let me know in the comments and I will work it into the series. Alright, let us finish strong with questions 6 through 10. Question 6. An IT team wants to ensure that only specific Azure resource types can be deployed within a particular subscription. Which Azure feature should they use? Option A, Azure Role-Based Access Control, also known as RBAC. Option B, Azure Policy. Option C, Azure Blueprints. Option D, Azure Management Groups. Take a second. The answer is B, Azure Policy. Azure Policy lets you define rules that resources must follow. You can use it to allow or deny specific resource types within a subscription. Azure RBAC, option A, controls WHO can do what? It is about permissions, not resource type restrictions. Azure Blueprints, option C, packages policies, RBAC, and ARM templates together for governance, but the specific mechanism doing the enforcement is still Azure Policy. Azure Management Groups, option D, help you organize subscriptions and apply governance at scale, but they are not the feature that defines resource type restrictions directly. Remember, policy controls what? RBAC controls WHO. Question 7. Which Azure support plan is the lowest tier that provides access to technical support from Microsoft engineers via email during business hours? Option A, Basic. Option B, Developer. Option C, Standard. Option D, Professional Direct. Think about the Azure support plan tiers. The answer is B, Developer. The basic support plan is free and provides access to documentation, white papers, and community support only. No technical support from engineers. The developer plan, which starts at $29 per month, is the first tier that includes one-on-one technical support from Microsoft engineers via email during business hours. Standard, option C, adds 24/7 access and faster response times and starts at $100 per month. Professional Direct, option D, adds proactive guidance and starts at $1,000 per month. The key word in this question is lowest tier, which immediately rules out Standard and Professional Direct. Question 8. A startup wants to host a web application on Azure without managing the underlying servers or operating systems. Which type of cloud service model best fits this requirement? Option A, Infrastructure as a Service. Option B, Platform as a Service. Option C, Software as a Service. Option D, Function as a Service. You should have a strong instinct for this one. The answer is B, Platform as a Service, or PaaS. PaaS provides a ready-to-use platform for building and deploying applications without managing the servers, operating systems, or networking underneath. A good example is Azure App Service, which lets you deploy web apps directly. Infrastructure as a Service, option A, gives you virtual machines, and you do manage the operating system, which contradicts the requirement. Software as a Service, option C, is a fully managed application like Microsoft 365. You do not build on top of it. Function as a Service, option D, also known as serverless, is a subset of PaaS but is event-driven and not the standard answer for web application hosting scenarios. Question 9. An enterprise company needs its Azure workloads to meet specific compliance requirements related to data residency in Germany. Which Azure concept is most relevant to this requirement? Option A, Availability Zones. Option B, Azure Regions and Geographies. Option C, Azure Sovereign Clouds. Option D, Azure Paired Regions. Take your time on this one. The answer is B, Azure Regions and Geographies. Azure divides its global infrastructure into geographies, which are discrete markets that preserve data residency and compliance boundaries. By selecting a region within Germany, the company ensures data stays within that geography. Availability zones, option A, are separate physical locations within a region used for high availability, not for data residency compliance. Azure Sovereign Clouds, option C, are isolated cloud environments for governments like Azure Government for the U.S. public sector. Germany has an Azure region, not a sovereign cloud. Azure Paired Regions, option D, are region pairs used for disaster recovery and business continuity. They involve two regions in the same geography, which supports data residency, but the concept most relevant to the requirement is regions and geographies. And here it is. Question 10. The one I promised you at the start. A company has deployed a virtual machine in Azure. The virtual machine is turned off from within the operating system. Will the company continue to be billed for the virtual machine? Option A, no, because the virtual machine is off. Option B, yes, because the virtual machine resources are still allocated. Option C, no, but only if auto shutdown is enabled. Option D, yes, but only for storage costs. This is the one that catches people in real exams. Think carefully. The answer is B, yes, because the virtual machine resources are still allocated. Here is the key distinction that Microsoft loves to test. Shutting down a VM from inside the operating system, also called a guest OS shutdown, does not deallocate the resources in Azure. The compute, memory, and reserved IP address are still allocated to your subscription, so you continue to be billed for the compute hours. To stop billing for compute, you must use the Azure portal, the Azure CLI, or Azure PowerShell to deallocate the virtual machine. This puts the VM into a stop deallocated state. In that state, you only pay for the storage, which is the disk, and any static public IP addresses. Option D is partially true about storage costs, but option B is the most complete and correct answer for the scenario described. This distinction between stopped and stopped deallocated is one of the most tested concepts on the AZ-900. That is all 10 questions for part 1. Let us do a quick recap. Question 1, private cloud for full hardware control. Question 2, Azure SQL database for fully managed relational databases. Question 3, consumption-based pricing model to minimize CapEx. Question 4, Azure cost management plus billing for budget alerts. Question 5, Azure virtual network for private networking. Question 6, Azure policy to restrict resource types. Question 7, developer plan for the lowest tier with engineer support. Question 8. Platform as a service for web apps without server management. Question 9. Azure regions and geographies for data residency. Question 10. A stopped VM that is not delocated still incurs compute charges. How did you do? Drop your score in the comments below. In part 2 of this series, we are going into 10 more questions that focus heavily on Azure security concepts, including Microsoft Defender for Cloud, Azure Key Vault, and Zero Trust principles. Security questions are the ones most people lose marks on, because the services sound similar but have very different purposes. Part 2 is going to change that for you. I am also going to include a question about a feature that was updated in the most recent exam objective refresh, so you definitely do not want to miss it. If you found this video useful, please hit the like button right now. It takes 2 seconds, and it genuinely helps this channel reach more IT professionals who are preparing for the same exam you are. And if you are not subscribed yet, you have about 10 seconds before the end screen covers everything. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you get part 2 the moment it goes live. Thank you so much for watching. Keep building your cloud skills. I will see you in part 2.